You can go to the symphony to hear the classics when you can own the collector's library of best-loved classics. This stupendous collection features every important category of classical music ever written. Best-loved overtures. Best-loved symphonies. Best-loved concertos. And best-loved dances. Plus, you'll get best-loved ballets and best-loved piano music.
The Collector's Library of Best-Loved Classics is just $19.95. To order, call this toll-free number now.
CNN Headline News, I'm Don Harrison. NATO is apparently considering taking a more active role in the civil war in what was Yugoslavia. This morning, NATO foreign ministers approved the unprecedented use of NATO troops and equipment for peacekeeping operations in European conflicts. Deputy U.S. Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleberger says the alliance must do more to relieve the suffering in Yugoslavia. The move comes as Serbian fighters are reportedly firing on convoys carrying food and medicine to the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina. There are also reports that Serbian forces bombarded a suburb of Sarajevo today, where 40,000 people have been trapped for weeks with almost no food. The United Nations is pressing Serbia to reopen the Sarajevo airport for humanitarian flights of relief supplies. Money has emerged as a controversial topic at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. Developing nations are asking the U.S. and other industrialized nations for money to protect the environment. But the U.S. is refusing to sign a treaty to preserve the world's endangered plants and animals. The U.S. says it would give developing nations too much control over how its financial contribution would be spent. Is it legitimate environmental reform or a smokescreen of trees? The Bush administration reportedly will announce a new policy today to reduce clear-cutting in U.S. national forests by 70%. But critics say the policy is full of loopholes and won't really halt the practice at all. Cutting down huge patches of trees is considered the most ecologically harmful way to harvest wood. One reason to preserve forests is because plants and animals in them may offer new scientific and medical discoveries. One example is the Pacific yew tree. As Greg Lefebvre reports, for some, it's the tree of life.
Scorned as a waste in the forest, the yew tree now proves it may be a lifesaver. Lois Hagemeister's life, she has cancer, and the Taxol from the tree's bark may provide a cure.
I'm just grateful for the drug that's available. What if for the people that want it and can't get it?
Cancer experts now say Taxol may also shrink some lung cancer tumors.
This is like a treasure hunt.
This is where we find the Taxol. Right in the
But we've got to keep...
We really don't know what controls its distribution, how to make sure that the tree will be around 10, 20, 50 years from now.
The lesson learned, slowly, is that everything in the forest has a purpose. Perhaps obscure, the effects of its destruction ripple through the rest of the planet's life.
The owl, in essence, is the species that holds us all together at the moment, because the owl is a kind of flagship species.
David Wake tracks the ever-declining wildlife in the Northwest. Example, the northern spotted owl, whose own decline is blamed on dwindling forests, who foresters blame for dwindling jobs.
There's a complicated food web in these forests, and the owl is a member of the food web near the top.
Another example, the tailed frog.
It is the only tailed frog in the world.
And it thrives, for now, right in civilization's path.
A common theme in biodiversity these days that there might be keystone species or keystone groups within ecosystems, that when these keystone groups are removed, you have an unraveling effect.
Now the frog's future is in doubt. Wade says so too, with the animals to which it relates. Greg Lefebvre, CNN, San Francisco.
A top Vietnamese official says that Ross Perot tried to do business with his country in 1987. The New York Times reports that Perot was there investigating whether American prisoners of war were still being held. Perot says the Vietnamese Foreign Ministry designated him as a business agent to help bring in American investment once relations are normalized between Washington and Hanoi. He says he had philosophical discussions about business with Vietnamese officials, but was not seeking investment opportunities there. Perot's still undeclared presidential campaign getting some high-powered help from both sides of the political spectrum. Former Carter administration Chief of Staff Hamilton Jordan and Republican strategist Ed Rollins both joining the Perot campaign yesterday. Jordan ran Jimmy Carter's campaign in 1976, and Rollins managed Ronald Reagan's 1984 campaign. They'll serve as co-chairman of Perot's presidential bid.
I think one of the challenges for Ed and myself in coming into this movement, as we described it, is not to try to fix something that's not broken. My role is to come in and try to understand the Perot phenomena, hopefully make a contribution to that phenomena, and hopefully have Ross Perot in the White House in January.
Vice President Dan Quayle says he's gained new insight into the struggles of unwed mothers. Quayle met with unwed parents in Fort Lauderdale, Florida yesterday. He called them genuine heroes and condemned so-called deadbeat dads. The vice president also had a few words to say about one of Ross Perot's new political handlers.
I am personally delighted that Ed Rollins, who is a Republican political consultant, is going to work for Ross Perot. He is a Republican consultant, and I hope that Ross Perot doesn't think this is a conspiracy, but I think we'll probably find out a lot more about Ross Perot and his campaign with Ed Rollins where he is.
President Bush will hold his second prime-time news conference in 4 years tonight. The broadcast networks say they don't plan to cover the address, however, because there's no indication it'll produce any breaking news. CNN will carry the news conference live. Likely Democratic nominee Bill Clinton hopes he'll be in the White House, not Heartbreak Hotel come January, but that's the tune he was wailing last night on the Arsenio Hall show. Earlier in the day, Clinton went after his other likely opponent, blasting Ross Perot for hiring top political strategists while insisting he's not a politician. Japan protesting the treatment of a Japanese television cameraman in China's Tiananmen Square. The cameraman was beaten and detained yesterday. He was covering the third anniversary of the crackdown on pro-democracy protesters there. Amnesty International says that China still routinely violates human rights and holds thousands of political prisoners. President Bush renewed most favored nation trading status for China on Tuesday. Congressional Democrats say that approach isn't encouraging human rights.
Each year, there has been mounting evidence of duplicity and intransigence by the Chinese communists. Yet, in response, the president continues to make concession after concession after concession.
We've taken a series of measures with the tools that we have, from missile sanctions to charges against the textile quota, to deal with problems that we've had with China in various areas, and we'll continue to do that.
Congress is considering legislation that would require China to limit arms sales and improve human rights if it wants to keep normal trade relations. Well, which king is king? The world is about to find out, as well as you. The Postal Service holding a ceremony at Graceland Mansion in Memphis at this moment. Priscilla Presley, the ex-wife of the former rock and roll king, is doing the official unveiling. We don't know what it is yet. We're waiting with you. It's the results of the Elvis commemorative stamp election. Between April 6th and 24th, more than 1 million people cast votes for either the young Slim Elvis or the more mature Las Vegas singer.
The young Elvis by a mile. That is a 3-to-1 margin. That's the young Elvis by a mile. I'd now like to ask Mr. Soden and Ms. Presley, Mr. Horgan, to join me in unveiling the winning design by Mark Stutzman.
Okay, it's the young Elvis in a vote by some 1 million people across the country. Incidentally, the Post Office Department put out 5 million ballots, but 4 million of them were kept, apparently, as souvenirs. The contest cost $300,000, but the Postal Service, which is constantly saying it operates in the red, says it's going to make money selling the stamp as a collector's item. It's the young Elvis as the Elvis Presley stamp, the first in a Legends of American Music series. It'll be issued next year. European community ministers are holding an emergency meeting in Oslo, Norway today. The conference follows Denmark's surprise rejection of a crucial treaty on economic and political union yesterday. Reuters news agency quotes the Danish foreign minister as saying his country will not ask for the so-called Maastricht Treaty to be renegotiated. Danish voters rejected the treaty Tuesday. Iran has told Islamic fundamentalists in Lebanon to release 2 German hostages unconditionally, according to a fundamentalist source in Beirut. Heinrich Strubig and Thomas Kempner believed to be the last Western hostages in Lebanon. German officials also say they could be released within 10 days. Their kidnappers have demanded freedom for 2 Shiite Muslims imprisoned in Germany on terrorism charges. The U.S. Army reprimanding 3 officers in connection with a Gulf War friendly fire incident. The Washington Post reporting the 3 officers received letters of reprimand from the Army 6 weeks ago for allowing their troops to cross into an unassigned area. A 22-year-old soldier was killed when his fellow troops mistook him for an Iraqi soldier. His family is demanding stronger action. Well, the world medical community is struggling to find ways to help AIDS victims. A doctor in San Francisco reports encouraging survival rates through lifestyle changes. Dan Rutz explains the holistic approach.
No. Dr. John Kaiser has many long-term survivors in his San Francisco practice. He advises patients to work at staying well.
Taking a look at a 4.25-year survey of my private practice patients who were following this program, there was a dramatic increase in survival time.
The Centers for Disease Control reports only 50% of those with full-fledged AIDS are alive 2 years later. Kaiser says 80% of the patients in his comprehensive healing program survive.
It's my belief that if I was at this point, if I had my hands on a drug that was achieving the same results that I'm achieving with these types of natural complementary therapies, that people would be beating my door down and there'd be millions of dollars being offered to bring it into production.
I will make changes one day at a time, and I will be successful at each one of them.
Kaiser combines standard medical treatment with stress reduction. He discourages smoking and urges patients to eat right, exercise, and take prescribed herbs and vitamins. The formula has not been proven, but makes sense to doctors like Marcus Conant, known for his aggressive medical treatment of AIDS.
The thing that I tell my patients that I think they understand is you can probably do more yourself in terms of modifying your lifestyle to prolong your life than any of the medications that we can prescribe for you.
How's your diet been recently?
Indirect endorsements aside, Kaiser allows it will take a scientifically controlled study to prove whether his methods really work.
What needs to be done is a study on an integrated, comprehensive program rather than just looking at isolated aspects of it and how that relates to HIV.
I believe that it's in your diet and it's in your mind's ability to be able to help cope with it.
Socket runs a quiet bed and breakfast inn. It's more than a living to him. It's become a way of living. Dan Rutz, CNN Medical News, San Francisco.
Dollars and Cents News next, and later, an old light may shine anew along Florida's coast.
This is CNN Headline News.
Wilt Chamberlain, the greatest basketball player in history, is testing the new Easy Spirit dress shoe for men. The one with the hidden sneaker inside.
Looks like a dress shoe, feels like a sneaker.
Wilt is doing...
Get the summertime blues. You better watch it now.
Summertime memories. Catching a ball game. A day at the zoo. A trip back in time at Living History Farms. Those memories and more await your family this good old summertime in Des Moines. When you and your family stay at a participating Good Old Summertime hotel, you'll receive 2-for-1 admissions at attractions all over Central Iowa. It's a good old summertime deal. To get your Good Old Summertime information package, call the Greater Des Moines Convention and Visitors Bureau at 1-800-451-2625.
CNN Headline News, I'm Don Harrison. The Japanese government and ABC News are protesting the beatings of their journalist by Chinese authorities in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. They were among several international reporters who were allegedly roughed up while covering the third anniversary of the government's crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators. A Chinese official says the correspondents broke Chinese law by trying to cover news on the square without permission. The anniversary may have passed relatively quietly this year, but many believe problems lie ahead for the Chinese government. Mike Chinoy reports.
On the streets of Beijing, there's little to remind people of what happened 3 years ago. But on this anniversary of the bloody crackdown in Tiananmen Square, those who participated in or supported China's ill-fated movement for democracy have not forgotten.
Even though not too many people talk about June 4th anymore, I think everyone remembers it clearly in their hearts. We try to forget, but we cannot.
For most people, though, the memories remain bottled up inside, silenced by government repression, blurred by the passage of time, and increasingly overshadowed by an economic boom that has made many Chinese more interested in getting rich than in getting even. For a country widely viewed abroad as the last bastion of hardline communism, there's more than a little irony here, because it has been the acceleration of capitalist-style economic reforms in recent months and the corresponding rise in the standard of living that has helped the regime stay in power. For all the progress, the leadership is still deeply divided between economic reformers like elder statesman Deng Xiaoping and his arch-rival, conservative Chen Yun. And in many walks of life, the conservatives are still dominant. Many observers believe the differences will intensify as, in steadily increasing numbers, the old guard passes from the scene.
The biggest single danger to China is the crisis of a political succession. And therefore, when the old guys die, Deng Xiaoping and Chen Yun especially, there will be a scramble for power. If the top leadership openly splits, as it did, for example, on the eve of the Tiananmen repression, then there is a chance of a social explosion in China.
The economic reforms themselves add to the danger because, along with prosperity, they carry within them the seeds of political reform.
Once people's living standards rise, it's inevitable that more people will demand democracy.
Chinese conservatives call this process peaceful evolution and constantly warn against it. But on this bleak anniversary, which no one is officially allowed to commemorate, there are growing numbers of people here who believe that for all the repression, the process of change in China may now be irreversible. Mike Chinoy, CNN, Beijing.
NATO's foreign ministers have reversed a decades-old policy and approved the use of troops and equipment for peacekeeping operations in European conflicts. Today's decision in Oslo, Norway, comes in the wake of continued fighting in Yugoslavia. Deputy U.S. Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger calling on NATO to also support the United Nations economic sanctions against Yugoslavia. As sporadic fighting continues in Bosnia-Herzegovina overnight, Serbia is calling for the lifting of those international sanctions. That follows the release of a UN report clearing the government of exclusive blame for the war in Bosnia. The Serbian president is hinting that he could resign to ease the sanctions. Meanwhile, UN officials are trying to open Sarajevo's airport for humanitarian aid flights. Hundreds of thousands of residents face starvation because of a Serbian blockade of the city. Cuba will be a hot topic on Capitol Hill today. The House Foreign Affairs Committee to vote on a series of amendments which could weaken current embargoes to Cuba. The Bush administration does not want to end a 30-year U.S. ban of food and medicine, but many congressional Democrats say the current policies don't consider the needs of the Cuban people. Iraq apparently is not having trouble receiving embargoed goods. Jordan says it's been unable to stop the flow of smuggled goods through its port of Aqaba. The Bush administration is outraged, and officials say planned U.S. exercises with the Jordanian military are being put off as a result. International embargo is supposed to limit Iraq to only food and medicine. The largest meeting of world leaders has begun tackling the problem of who will pay to save the Earth. The Earth Summit opened in Rio de Janeiro yesterday. Poorer nations want the industrialized North to bear the brunt of the cost. But UN officials say developing nations themselves will have to find much of the estimated $625 billion to make the changes. The owl, another subject of concern for environmentalists. In Montana, one man has taken it upon himself to find out all there is to know about the wise creatures. Toby Hadley reports.
Montana's abundant wildlife population includes 13 species of owls. Now, researching owls isn't as high profile as working with peregrine falcons or bald eagles, for example. They're secretive, cagey, and nocturnal, which means the research is difficult and sparse. That's partly why Boston native Denver Holt began studying owls in the mid-'70s and formed the Missoula-based Owl Research Institute 3 years ago.
One of the reasons I formed the institute is because I'd worked with federal and state agencies and private research groups before, and you just got caught up in the bureaucracy of doing, and I don't mean to say doing nothing as an attack, but you end up just being a bureaucrat, sitting around, reading papers, reading what other people were doing, and not really getting out in the field and doing field biology.
Denver and University of Montana student Leslie LaRue are checking up on several long-eared owls just west of Missoula this day. The 6-year project hopes to discover several of the owls' habits. The information will eventually be published.
Most of the time you hear about owls these days, it's not these kind. It's the northern spotted owl. Spotted owls don't even exist here in Montana, but that still creates some problems for Denver. And he says, however, he's learned how to handle them.
Yeah, exactly. That has been happening, where people associate any owl with the spotted owl, and particularly those people who are affected by the spotted owl controversy tend to look at what I do as, oh, those damn owls. And I can take that with a grain of salt, you know, as long as they don't try to intimidate me, then I won't, you know, respond. But normally we have pretty good conversations, and a lot of those people I invite to come out in the field. And they come out in the field and they get to trap owls and handle owls like we're doing, and they realize that, oh, hey, that's not bad.
Denver wants to keep the nonprofit institute small and research-oriented, so he can stay in the field and continue to work with his birds. In Missoula, Montana, Toby Hatley for CNN.
The U.S. Forest Service expected to unveil a new policy reducing the number of trees cut in national forests. That plan would call for clear cutting to be reduced by 70% within the next 3 years. But environmentalists say the policy is nothing but window dressing because it won't mean any real reductions. Foresters nationwide will get details of the plan in a memo. House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Dan Rostenkowski reportedly set up a government-paid trust fund to benefit his twin sisters. The fund apparently used to pay rent for a district office in Illinois. WGN reports his sisters own the property and received $114,000 in rent since 1980. House ethics rules bar representatives from paying family members for services. Rostenkowski says he's done nothing wrong because his lease predates the rules. Ross Perot's business dealings coming under close scrutiny. Today's New York Times reports the undeclared presidential candidate wasn't just looking for prisoners of war during a 1987 trip to Hanoi. Perot now admits he also discussed private business dealings. In a 1990 letter, the Vietnamese Foreign Ministry designated Perot as a business agent for Hanoi once relations with the U.S. returned to normal. Meanwhile, the Texas billionaire has appointed 2 veteran political strategists to co-manage his campaign. Ed Rollins managed Ronald Reagan's re-election campaign, and Hamilton Jordan ran Jimmy Carter's presidential campaign. President Bush will be live on television tonight. He'll be holding a primetime news conference during which he'll pitch a balanced budget amendment to Congress. The 3 networks aren't showing it. It will be seen on CNN. Well, the AIDS-infected Philadelphia man accused of buying sex from boys will be back in court today. Edward Savitz and his attorneys want a federal court to order his bail conditions changed so Savitz can be released from jail. Defense lawyers say no mental hospital will take Savitz under his bail condition, which requires he be isolated from others. Savitz has been held in the city's detention center since he was arrested in March. When does no mean something else? Well, in Pennsylvania, a judge has ruled that a woman saying no was not enough to convict a man of rape. Richard Roth reports that case highlights the difficulty of proving acquaintance rape.
The alleged incident occurred 4 years ago inside this